Welcome, my dear friends, to a quiet journey through one of the most perplexing and transformative periods in all of human history, the Cold War. If you've ever found yourself wondering how two great powers could stand at the brink of global conflict for decades without truly firing a single shot directly at one another, you are most certainly not alone. Together, we shall unfurl this vast and intricate tapestry, woven from fear and ideology, from technological ambition and profound human drama. Before we delve into the intricate dance of spies and doctrines, of proxy wars and a relentless race to the stars, let us first set the stage. Imagine, if you will, the world as it stood in the twilight of the Second World War. The great, terrible struggle against fascism was over, but the victory, hard-won and soaked in sacrifice, did not usher in an era of universal peace. Far from it, a different kind of shadow began to lengthen across the globe, a chilling, pervasive tension between former allies. You see, the very powers that had stood shoulder to shoulder against a common enemy soon found themselves gazing at each other across an ideological chasm. On one side, the United States and its Western allies, championing democracy and the free market capitalism, a system built upon individual liberties and economic freedoms. On the other, the Soviet Union, with its grand vision of communism, striving for a classless society, albeit through a centralized, state-controlled economy and an authoritarian political structure. It was an irreconcilable difference in worldviews, a fundamental disagreement on how human society should be organized and governed. This wasn't a conflict of direct military engagement between the superpowers themselves, at least not in the traditional sense of armies clashing on battlefields. Rather, it was a profound struggle for global influence, played out through political maneuvering, economic competition, and an unrelenting propaganda war. It was a contest of ideas, a war of ideologies, where each side believed its system offered the ultimate path to human progress. And what's fascinating is how this underlying ideological struggle shaped every single decision, every alliance, every crisis that unfolded over nearly half a century. Think of it as a prolonged game of chess played on a global board with immense stakes. Both sides were constantly probing, reacting, and countering, seeking advantage without risking total annihilation. The shadow of the atomic bomb, a stark and terrifying reality that emerged from the ashes of the Second World War, loomed large over every move. This created a peculiar kind of stability, a doctrine of mutually assured destruction, or MAD as it chillingly came to be known. It meant that a direct, full-scale war between the two nuclear giants would guarantee their own demise, and perhaps the very end of civilization itself. And so, the conflict took on new, often subtle, and always dangerous forms, as we shall soon see. Seeds of division. Our previous discussion touched upon the faint, nascent division emerging from the ashes of a global conflict, a quiet whisper that would soon grow into a thunderous, prolonged silence of tension. What we are witnessing is the very genesis of a new kind of struggle, one where the battle lines would be drawn not on open fields, but across ideologies, within the shadows, and deep inside the human mind. Now, as the smoke cleared from the Second World War, two titans emerged, blinking in the new light of a fractured world. On one side, the United States and its Western allies, a bastion of democratic ideals and capitalist dreams. On the other, the Soviet Union and its burgeoning Eastern Bloc, championing a vision of communism, of collective ownership and state control. Two vastly different philosophies, two fundamentally opposing ways of seeing the world, and it was this deep ideological chasm, you see, that would fuel the entire conflict. Indeed, the Cold War, as it would come to be known, spanned nearly half a century, from 1945 to 1991. What's truly peculiar about it, perhaps, is its very nature. A war, yes, but one largely fought without direct, open battle between these two superpowers. Instead, the skirmishes would take place in the realm of influence, a grand chessboard where proxy wars, propaganda, technological races, and most potently espionage would become the weapons of choice. You might be wondering, how does one wage war without direct confrontation? Well, imagine a prolonged, high-stakes game of chess, where each move is meticulously calculated, every piece strategically positioned, and the threat of a fatal checkmate is ever present, yet never quite executed. The early days saw swift actions that solidified these emerging blocks. There was Winston Churchill's famous declaration of an Iron Curtain descending across Europe, a vivid image that encapsulated the stark division. Then, America stepped forward with the Truman Doctrine, a solemn promise to aid nations threatened by communist expansion. This was soon followed by the Marshall Plan, an ambitious economic recovery effort for war-torn Europe, which the Soviets, perceiving it as a capitalist ploy, rejected for their satellite states. These were not isolated events, but rather threads in an ever-tightening knot. The division of Germany, and particularly the city of Berlin, served as a microcosm of this global struggle. The Soviet blockade of West Berlin in 1948, a desperate attempt to starve out the Western presence, was met with the ingenuity of the Berlin airlift, a testament to resolve where Allied planes flew in supplies day and night. And from these tensions, formal alliances were born. NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, uniting the West. And in response, the Warsaw Pact, binding the communist nations of Eastern Europe under Soviet leadership. What we observe here is a world rapidly bifurcating, hardening into distinct, often adversarial camps, setting the stage for what would be decades of unease, suspicion, and a constant, low hum of impending global change. Curtain falls slowly. Indeed, as the ashes of the Second World War cooled, a new kind of chill began to settle over the world, a chill not of frost, but of suspicion and mistrust. This era, which we now remember as the Cold War, was not a conflict fought with bullets and bombs in the traditional sense. Rather, it was a prolonged, often silent struggle between two vastly different ways of seeing the world. The democratic, capitalist ideals championed by the United States and its Western allies, and the communist ideology espoused by the Soviet Union. Think of it as a grand, global chess match played not on a board, but across continents, with ideologies and national wills as the pieces. These two superpowers, formerly allies against a common enemy, now found themselves locked in a struggle for global influence, fundamentally believing their own system was the path to a better future for humanity. What's interesting is, this battle for hearts and minds often took place in the shadows, far from the public eye. This is where the quiet art of espionage truly came into its own. Espionage, you see, is as old as civilization itself, but during the Cold War it evolved into a sophisticated, high-stakes game. It was about gathering secrets, understanding intentions, and often about sowing doubt and discord, all without firing a single shot. Here's what's fascinating. Both sides established intricate networks of intelligence agencies. On the American side, organizations like the Central Intelligence Agency, or CIA, were formed to collect information and conduct secret operations abroad. The Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, focused internally, protecting the nation from foreign agents within its borders. And then there was the National Security Agency, the NSA, a master of codes and communications, tasked with both protecting and piercing through the most complex layers of encrypted messages. Across the Iron Curtain, the Soviet Union had its own formidable counterparts. Most famously, the KGB, the Committee for State Security, became a symbol of Soviet power, conducting surveillance domestically and espionage operations internationally. Its tactics were often ruthless, yet its agents were remarkably effective in their clandestine efforts. The GRU, the main intelligence directorate, served as the military's intelligence arm, equally adept at gathering vital information. What this meant was a constant, unseen war of wits where every piece of information, every defection, every technological breakthrough could tip the delicate balance of power. It was a time when trust was a luxury few could afford, and where the lines between friend and foe could blur with terrifying ease. Ideologies collide peacefully. The curtain, it seemed, was still slowly falling, but not just on the grand stages of political power. There was another, far more clandestine performance unfolding, one hidden in the shadows, whispered in code, and sometimes even disguised in plain sight. We speak now of intelligence, of espionage, and of the hidden battles fought in the quiet alleys and behind closed doors by agents known only by code names or the secrets they carried. Imagine, if you will, a vast, intricate game of chess, played not with pawns and kings on a board, but with secrets and lies across continents. Both America and the Soviet Union, having emerged from the Second World War as uneasy giants, quickly began to establish sophisticated networks dedicated to knowing the enemy's deepest intentions. This wasn't merely about armies and weapons. It was about the very thoughts in the minds of leaders, the subtle shifts in policy, and the scientific breakthroughs that could tip the delicate balance of power. Every scrap of information became a priceless commodity. At the heart of this shadowy world were organizations that would become legendary, or perhaps notorious. For the United States, there was the Central Intelligence Agency, or CIA, tasked with gathering intelligence and conducting covert operations far beyond American borders. Domestically, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, worked to protect the nation from internal threats, including, of course, Soviet infiltration. Later, the National Security Agency, the NSA, would emerge, dedicated to the intricate dance of codes, creating them, and ever more importantly, breaking them. Across the divide, the Soviet Union had its own titans, the formidable KGB, a sprawling agency responsible for both foreign espionage and internal security, and the GRU, their military intelligence arm. These were the institutions that orchestrated much of the hidden conflict of the Cold War. Perhaps one of the most chilling revelations from this era came from a project called VENONA. This was an American program, launched in the quiet of 1943, aimed at deciphering Soviet diplomatic communications. Years later, when its secrets were finally laid bare, VENONA confirmed what many had suspected: a vast network of Soviet spies operating deeply within Western governments. It brought to light the atomic spies, individuals like Klaus Fuchs, a brilliant physicist who passed atomic secrets to the Soviets, dramatically accelerating their nuclear program. Or Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, an American couple executed for their role in transmitting these same, terrifying atomic blueprints. Then there were the Cambridge Spies, a network of highly placed British agents, names like Kim Philby and Guy Burgess, who, driven by ideology, fed intelligence to Moscow for decades, deeply compromising British and American security. Their stories highlight a fascinating, albeit troubling, aspect of espionage, the human element. For all the sophisticated technology, it was often individuals. Driven by conviction, by money, by disillusionment, or by a complex blend of many things, who profoundly shaped the flow of secrets. Indeed, they acted as invisible threads, weaving their own narratives into the grand tapestry of geopolitical maneuverings. The nuclear shadow. Indeed, as these two ideological titans, the West and the East, stood poised at the precipice of a new kind of conflict, what truly defined their silent struggle was often unseen. You see, the Cold War in many ways was a war of secrets, a quiet ballet of shadows and whispers played out not on battlefields, but in dimly lit rooms, behind coded messages, and sometimes, even in the most unsuspecting places. Think of it this way: if the previous chapter laid bare the clashing philosophies, this one unfurls the delicate, clandestine tapestry woven by those who sought to uncover the other's intentions. It's a world where trust was a rare commodity and suspicion a constant companion. From the very beginning, each side sought to penetrate the other's defenses, to understand their plans, their capabilities, and perhaps most crucially, their weaknesses. This pursuit of hidden knowledge was paramount, for in an era dominated by nuclear threats, information could mean the difference between deterrence and global catastrophe. One of the most remarkable stories, a testament to this ceaseless quest for intelligence, comes from a simple wooden carving. Imagine, if you will, the American ambassador to the Soviet Union, W. Averell Harriman, receiving a gift in 1945 from Soviet schoolchildren, a beautifully carved Great Seal of the United States, a gesture of friendship, one might assume. Yet for 6 long years, this seemingly innocuous emblem hung in the ambassador's Moscow residence, all the while housing a tiny, passive listening device known as the Thing. It was a marvel of its time, designed by the brilliant inventor Leon Theremin. What made it so ingenious, so insidious, was its lack of an internal power source. It lay dormant, a silent observer, until activated by a radio signal from outside. Only then did it resonate with the conversations within the room, broadcasting them back to Soviet ears. It was almost impossible to detect with the technology of the day, a constant, invisible ear in the very heart of American diplomacy. This almost whimsical tale of the Great Seal Bug, a device so simple, yet so effective, highlights a crucial aspect of Cold War espionage: the sheer creativity and audacity employed to gain an informational edge. The pursuit of secrets wasn't always about grand technological leaps. Sometimes it was about finding the most unexpected vessel for surveillance. It was a time when the most ordinary objects could harbor the most extraordinary secrets, and this, perhaps, is where the story truly becomes vivid. The War of Ideologies found its most poignant expression in the War of Information, fought in the deep silence with shadows as its soldiers. Spies in the silence. Now, as the world began to sort itself into these two grand ideological camps, the capitalist West and the communist East, a new kind of war began to brew. It was a war fought not with open declarations and marching armies, at least not directly, but with whispers, with shadows, and with a profound desire to understand the adversary's every move. This, dear listener, was the era of espionage, a game played in the dark with colossal stakes. Think of it as a global chess match, where each side desperately wanted to know the other's strategy before a single pawn was moved. In the United States, new agencies like the Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA, born in 1947, were shaped to gather intelligence and conduct covert operations across the globe. Their domestic counterpart, the FBI, focused on protecting America from spies within its borders, sometimes even watching its own citizens. You see, fear can cast a long shadow. And then there was the National Security Agency, the NSA, forged in 1952, whose silent mission was to master the art of codes, both creating their own unbreakable ones and, more crucially, breaking those of their rivals. Across the Iron Curtain, the Soviet Union had its own formidable force, the KGB, the Committee for State Security. This was an organization that became synonymous with both external espionage and internal repression, a truly powerful and often feared entity. Underneath the KGB, the GRU, the main intelligence directorate of the General Staff, handled military intelligence, silent and unseen. Here's what's interesting. The tools of this trade were often ingenious, sometimes absurd. Imagine the sheer audacity of it. In 1945, Soviet students gifted the U.S. Ambassador Avril Harriman a beautifully carved Great Seal of the United States. For 6 years, it hung proudly in his Moscow residence, discreetly housing a tiny, passive listening device. This bug, a marvel of its time, had no batteries, no active circuits. It only activated when hit by a radio signal from outside, resonating with the conversations in the room and sending them back to a waiting Soviet ear. It was almost impossible to find, you see, because it had no active power source. It was discovered only by chance in 1952, after American technicians, listening in on stray frequencies, detected faint voices. The full strategic impact of this Great Seal bug wasn't revealed until 1960, when Ambassador Henry Cabot Lodge Jr. presented it before the United Nations Security Council, a rather public embarrassment for the Soviets, and there were whispers that over 100 such devices had been found in U.S. installations across Eastern Europe. Then consider the sheer creativity, or perhaps desperation, that led to projects like the American Berlin Wall rises. The clandestine world of espionage during the Cold War was a stage where the most ingenious and sometimes ludicrous schemes unfolded. You see, with open warfare unthinkable due to the specter of atomic annihilation, the battle shifted to the shadows. It became a war of information, of secrets stolen and secrets kept. Each side, East and West, desperately sought to understand the other's intentions, their capabilities, and most importantly, their weaknesses. Imagine, if you will, the intelligence agencies of both superpowers, the CIA and the FBI in the United States, MI5 and MI6 in Britain, and of course, the formidable KGB and GRU for the Soviets, all locked in a perpetual silent struggle. Their missions were clear, yet often shrouded in ambiguity: gather vital intelligence abroad, protect national security at home, and at times conduct operations so covert and audacious that they bordered on the fantastical. What's particularly fascinating about this era is the sheer creativity of these efforts. Take, for instance, a curious device known as the Great Seal bug. In August of 1945, a symbolic gift, a carved wooden Great Seal of the United States, was presented to the American ambassador in Moscow. For 6 years it hung there, seemingly innocuous, yet hidden within its intricate design was a passive listening device, a true marvel of its time. It required no batteries, no active power source of its own. It simply resonated when struck by a radio signal transmitted from outside, effectively turning the ambassador's residence into an open book. Its conversations relayed directly to Soviet listeners. This almost undetectable piece of technology was only discovered by chance years later, a testament to its ingenious design. Then we have the rather more whimsical, yet equally ambitious American endeavor, Project Acoustic Kitty. The idea, hatched by the CIA in the 1960s, was to transform a common cat into a mobile listening station. Think of it, a tiny microphone surgically implanted in the cat's ear canal, a small transmitter near its skull, and an antenna discreetly woven into its tail. The notion was that these feline operatives could roam freely, unnoticed, into places where human agents could not. While the project, by most accounts, ended rather ignominiously, perhaps with a fateful encounter with a taxi, it perfectly illustrates the lengths to which intelligence agencies would go. The sheer imagination, if not always the practicality, of these hidden battles. These were not mere fanciful tales, you see. They were real operations, born of intense paranoia and the constant pressure to gain even the slightest edge. Whether it was the stealthy installation of listening posts near Soviet borders, the daring construction of tunnels beneath divided cities to tap communication lines, or the high-flying reconnaissance of U-2 spy planes, every effort was made to pierce the veil of secrecy. It was a time when the very air seemed thick with suspicion, and the whisper of a secret could reshape the course of history. Cuban Missile Stand. The division of Germany, and indeed of Berlin itself, was perhaps the most tangible symbol of this growing global rift, but beneath the surface, in the shadows, another kind of war was brewing, a war of whispers, shadows, and secrets. This was the era of espionage, of spies and counterspies, a clandestine struggle that would define the Cold War as much as any political summit or military standoff. Imagine, if you will, two grand chess masters, each trying to anticipate the other's every move, not on a physical board, but across the vast geopolitical landscape. Intelligence, you see, became the most coveted commodity. Both the United States and the Soviet Union built formidable intelligence agencies to gather these secrets. For the Americans, it was the CIA, established in 1947, tasked with foreign intelligence and covert operations, alongside the FBI, which focused on protecting the homeland from infiltration, and the NSA, founded in 1952, dedicated to the intricate world of signals intelligence, breaking and making codes. On the Soviet side, the KGB, formed in 1954, was a monolithic entity, responsible for both foreign espionage and internal security, often with a brutal hand. And then there was the GRU, the military intelligence arm, operating with chilling efficiency. What's especially intriguing is how these powers sought to gain an advantage. Think of Soviet ingenuity, for instance, with something called the Great Seal Bug, also known as the Thing. In 1945, a gift to the American ambassador in Moscow, a beautifully carved Great Seal of the United States, hung in his residence for 6 years. But inside, unseen, unheard, was a miniature listening device. It had no battery, no power supply of its own. It simply resonated. When a radio signal from outside hit it, it would vibrate with the sounds of conversations within the room, sending those whispers back to a Soviet listening post. A truly elegant, if unsettling, piece of passive surveillance, nearly impossible to detect with the technology of the time. It was only accidentally discovered in 1952, by sheer chance, after stray voices were picked up on American secret frequencies. On the American side, there were certainly moments of audacious, if not always successful, creativity. Consider Project Acoustic Kitty from the 1960s. The idea was to turn actual cats into mobile listening devices, perhaps allowing them to wander unnoticed into sensitive areas. Imagine that: a tiny microphone in a cat's ear canal, a small transmitter at the base of its skull, and antenna woven along its tail. The project reportedly cost a rather significant sum, only to be abandoned. The challenge, it seems, was that cats are, well, stubbornly independent creatures. They rarely follow orders with the kind of precision required for intelligence gathering. One account, perhaps apocryphal, suggests a test cat's mission ended prematurely by an unfortunate encounter with a taxi. Regardless, the core idea speaks volumes about the lengths to which these nations would go, and then there were the human elements. The proxy wars begin. The Cuban Missile Crisis, you see, brought us to the very precipice of destruction. Yet it also underscored a profound truth. Much of the Cold War was a silent struggle, fought not with tanks or missiles, but with secrets, with whispers in the dark. It was a time when the very act of knowing what the other side was planning could mean the difference between peace and annihilation. And so, as the world held its breath during those 13 days, another kind of battle was always raging beneath the surface, the battle waged by spies. This shadowy contest, perhaps the most fascinating aspect of this long twilight struggle, involved a vast network of individuals and organizations, each striving to uncover the hidden intentions and capabilities of their adversary. It was, in essence, a game of cat and mouse played on a global stage, where the stakes were nothing less than the future of humanity itself. Think of it as a constant, underlying hum. A persistent effort by both the United States and the Soviet Union to peer behind the curtain of the other's operations. Need for information was immense. For the West, it was about understanding the Soviet Union's military might, its technological advancements, and its political machinations. For the Soviets, it was about deciphering the West's intentions, particularly concerning nuclear weapons and economic strategies. This mutual thirst for knowledge fueled an unprecedented age of espionage. At the heart of this complex web were agencies like the CIA, the FBI, and the NSA for the Americans, and the ubiquitous KGB, along with the GRU, for the Soviets. Each played its part, sometimes overtly, but more often in the deepest shadows. The CIA, for instance, focused on gathering intelligence and conducting covert operations abroad, while the FBI safeguarded the homeland against Soviet infiltration. The NSA, created a little later, became the silent guardian of communications, both its own and those of its adversaries, through the intricate art of code breaking. Across the Iron Curtain, the KGB was a formidable entity, its reach extending far and wide, both domestically and internationally. It was perhaps the most feared intelligence agency in the world, a symbol of Soviet power, responsible for everything from espionage to internal security. And then there was the GRU, the military intelligence arm, focusing on gathering information of strategic importance to the armed forces. What's truly remarkable is the sheer ingenuity, and sometimes the sheer absurdity, of the methods employed. Space Wraith Sword. The clandestine whispers of espionage form another crucial thread in this intricate tapestry of the Cold War. As the world divided itself, suspicions deepened, and the need to peer behind the Iron Curtain, or indeed the Velvet One, became paramount. You see, while armies stood poised and ideologies clashed openly, a silent, shadowy war unfolded, a war fought with secrets, deception, and the ingenious, sometimes absurd, tools of spycraft. Imagine, if you will, the early days, just after the Great War. The United States and the Soviet Union, once allies, now viewed each other with profound distrust. Each sought to understand the other's intentions, capabilities, and vulnerabilities. This wasn't merely about military might, it was about political will, economic strength, and technological advancement. In this new arena, the spy and the counterspy became figures of immense, if often unseen, importance. Agencies like America's CIA and FBI, and the Soviet Union's formidable KGB and GRU, grew into vast, intricate networks, each tasked with gathering intelligence abroad and protecting secrets at home. Now, the very nature of espionage itself is rather curious. It involves collecting and analyzing information about perceived adversaries, often through methods that defy international law. Yet in the Cold War, it was frequently deemed a matter of crucial national importance. What is interesting is the almost mirrored dance of these rival intelligence services. Each side was acutely aware of the other's efforts, leading to an elaborate game of cat and mouse, where every success by one side was met with renewed, often frantic, efforts by the other. This dynamic fueled not only technological innovation, but also a peculiar kind of psychological warfare. Consider for a moment the motivations of those drawn into this shadow world. For some, it was a fervent belief in their ideology, communism or capitalism, a conviction that their cause was just. Others were moved by patriotism, a deep-seated loyalty to their nation. And then there were those driven by more personal reasons, perhaps money, or a frustration with their own government, or even simpler desires for recognition and ego. Indeed, many became walk-ins, offering their services to the other side, sometimes with devastating consequences, a testament to the complex human element within this grand geopolitical struggle. Arms race escalate. Indeed, as we journey through the quiet history of the Cold War, it becomes clear that this was a conflict waged not just with tanks and battleships, but also with whispers and shadows. A clandestine struggle beneath the surface of diplomacy and open confrontation. We turn now to a particularly fascinating aspect of this hidden war, the world of espionage. Think of it as a grand, silent chess match played out on a global board, where every move was shrouded in secrecy and every piece held critical information. From the very outset, immediately following the twilight of the Second World War, the newly emerging superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, realized the profound necessity of knowing the other's intentions, their capabilities, their deepest secrets. This wasn't merely about curiosity, it was about survival. Both sides feared the spread of the other's ideology, whether it was communism or capitalism, and this profound distrust fueled an insatiable hunger for intelligence. You see, espionage, by its nature, involves the gathering and analysis of information about an adversary, often through means that contravene international law. Yet it was, and often still is, considered a matter of paramount national importance. And hand in hand with espionage came counterintelligence, the art and science of protecting one's own nation from such illicit information gathering. It was a dance between shadow and light, each side trying to outwit the other, constantly adapting, always listening. The history of such covert operations stretches back into antiquity, truly, to biblical times even. But it was in the crucible of the 20th century, sharpened by the demands of 2 world wars, that espionage agencies truly came into their own. During the Cold War, this became even more pronounced, for in the absence of direct, overt conflict, the intelligence war became a critical battleground. Propaganda might have filled the airwaves, but secrets were the true currency of power. Consider the formidable agencies that rose to prominence during this era. For the United States, there was the Central Intelligence Agency, or CIA, established in 1947 to gather foreign intelligence and conduct covert operations abroad. Then within its own borders, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, diligently worked to protect against Soviet espionage, often scrutinizing groups like the Communist Party USA. And beyond that, the National Security Agency, the NSA, formed in 1952, dedicated itself to the creation and breaking of codes, the unseen language of war. On the Soviet side, the KGB, the Committee for State Security, was a behemoth, a powerful entity involved in both domestic and foreign espionage, famously headquartered in the Lubyanka building in Moscow. There was also the GRU, the main intelligence directorate of the General Staff of the Soviet Army, their military intelligence arm. These were not just acronyms, they represented vast, intricate networks of agents, analysts, and technological marvels, all engaged in a relentless struggle to gain an upper hand. Indeed, some of the techniques they employed were quite remarkable, even rather bizarre by our modern perspective. Imagine, if you will, a tiny passive listening device known as the Thing, hidden within a wooden carving of the Great Seal of the United States. This seal, a gift from Soviet students, hung in the U.S. ambassador's residence in Moscow for 6 years. It possessed no power source of its own. Instead, it would only activate and transmit conversations when pulsed with radio waves from a passing Soviet van. It was a marvel of passive technology, nigh on impossible to detect with the methods of the time, only discovered by chance in 1952 when American technicians picked up faint, stray voices on a secret frequency. Then there was Project Acoustic Kitty, a rather ambitious, equally peculiar endeavor by the CIA in the 1960s. The idea was to transform a cat into a mobile listening device. Imagine that, a tiny microphone surgically implanted in its ear canal, a small transmitter near the base of its skull, and an antenna woven into the fur of its tail. The thought was that a cat could wander unnoticed into secure areas, particularly around foreign embassies, recording vital conversations. While the project was eventually abandoned, deemed impractical due to the feline's inherent independence, it does paint a vivid picture of the creative, and sometimes curious, lengths to which intelligence agencies would go in their pursuit of secrets. Both the successful elegance of the Thing and the whimsical ambition of Acoustic Kitty illustrate the extraordinary, almost absurd, efforts made to gain even the slightest advantage in the silent war that defined an age. Détente and dialogue. The delicate dance of shadows and whispers, between nations and within them, shaped the very fabric of the Cold War. You see, amidst the rhetoric and the grand displays of military might, there was always another war being waged, a silent one, fought in the murky depths of intelligence and espionage. It was a contest of minds, of secrets, of understanding precisely what the other side was thinking and planning. Imagine, if you will, the vast, intricate network of spies and counterspies, a hidden tapestry woven beneath the surface of everyday life. Both the United States and the Soviet Union, in their efforts to outmaneuver one another, poured immense resources into gathering intelligence. This wasn't merely about military secrets, though that was certainly a large part of it. It was also about understanding political intentions, economic vulnerabilities, and even the subtle shifts in leadership and ideology that might give one side an advantage. Now, the very nature of espionage is to operate in the dark, to remain unseen. And yet sometimes, the peculiar ingenuity employed by these hidden armies comes to light. Take, for instance, a truly remarkable piece of Soviet technology, known as the Thing, or more formally, the Great Seal Bug. In 1945, a gift was presented to the American ambassador in Moscow, a beautifully carved replica of the Great Seal of the United States. For 6 long years, this apparently innocent artwork hung in the ambassador's residence, all the while concealing a miniature, passive listening device within. Here's what's interesting: it had no power source of its own. It only became active when struck by a radio signal from outside, resonating with the conversations in the room and transmitting them silently back to a Soviet listening post. The sheer cleverness of it, a device almost impossible to detect with the technology of the day, truly speaks to the lengths to which both sides would go. But the Americans, too, ventured into the realm of the unconventional, though perhaps with less success. Picture Project Acoustic Kitty, a curious indeed, perhaps even absurd, endeavor by the CIA in the 1960s. The idea was to transform a cat into a mobile listening device, believing that cats could roam freely and unnoticed around places of interest, like foreign embassies. Technicians painstakingly implanted a microphone in the cat's ear canal, a tiny transmitter at the base of its skull, and an antenna cleverly disguised along its tail beneath the fur. After years of preparation and expenditure, the Acoustic Kitty was supposedly ready for its first field test near a Soviet compound in Washington. But as the story often goes, it was reportedly struck by a taxi, bringing an abrupt end to this particular chapter of animal espionage. While some within the CIA dispute the tale of the taxi, they did concede that using felines for such missions was, well, not practical. These seemingly bizarre anecdotes, the hidden bug in a diplomatic gift, the ambitious notion of a spy cat, they illustrate something profound about the Cold War. It was a time when the boundaries of imagination were pushed, where paranoia and creativity intertwined in the relentless pursuit of knowledge. The stakes were so extraordinarily high, the ideological chasm so vast, that almost no idea, however outlandish, was entirely dismissed. For in this shadow war, a single piece of intelligence, a single secret, could potentially alter the course of history. Human rights echoes. The delicate dance of détente, as we've seen, was a brief pause in a much larger, more intricate ballet. Beneath the surface, away from the negotiating tables and public pronouncements, another silent, relentless contest was unfolding, the world of espionage. Throughout the Cold War, both superpowers engaged in a grand, shadowy game of wits and technology, vying for secrets, for intelligence, for any fragment of information that might offer an edge over the other side. Imagine, if you will, the intelligence agencies of the United States and the Soviet Union as two colossal, unseen chess players, constantly anticipating each other's moves, each attempting to peer into the other's mind. On the American side, organizations like the CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency, focused their gaze beyond their borders, gathering vital intelligence and conducting covert operations. The FBI, or Federal Bureau of Investigation, meanwhile, diligently protected the homeland, rooting out foreign agents within its own soil. And then there was the NSA, the National Security Agency, weaving intricate tapestries of code and deciphering the most complex communications imaginable. Across the Iron Curtain, the Soviet Union had its own formidable players. The KGB, perhaps the most infamous of them all, was a vast, sprawling organization, responsible for both foreign intelligence gathering and the ruthless suppression of dissent at home. Alongside them, the GRU, the main intelligence directorate of the General Staff of the Soviet Army, focused on military intelligence, often working in concert with the KGB, but sometimes in quiet competition. These acronyms, you see, represent far more than just government bureaus. They were the nerve centers of a perpetual global shadow war, where perceptions and information were as potent as any weapon. What's truly fascinating is the sheer ingenuity, and at times the sheer absurdity, of the methods employed. Consider the Soviet Union's creation. Gorbachev's gentle reforms. After the whispers of human rights began to echo across the divided world, a new chapter unfolded within the Cold War's silent struggle, one where shadows grew long and secrets became currency. Indeed, the very essence of this conflict, which never erupted into direct battle between the superpowers, was to be found in the clandestine realms of espionage and counter-espionage. Imagine, if you will, a vast, intricate game of chess played out across the global stage, where every move was concealed, every piece a potential double agent, and the stakes were nothing less than the future of ideologies. Espionage in its simplest form is the art of gathering intelligence about an adversary, while counter-espionage is its shield, protecting one's own secrets from prying eyes. This delicate dance, unlawful perhaps by international standards, though always deemed vital for national security, became the Cold War's beating heart. From the American side, organizations like the CIA, or the Central Intelligence Agency, formed in 1947, took on the task of gathering intelligence and conducting covert operations beyond American borders. Domestically, the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, guarded against Soviet infiltration, even focusing its gaze, perhaps overly so in hindsight, upon the Communist Party within the United States. Then there was the NSA, the National Security Agency, born in 1952, dedicated to the intricate world of codes, both creating them for American communications and, more famously, breaking the ciphers of their adversaries. Across the Iron Curtain, the Soviet Union wielded its own formidable instruments. The KGB, the Committee for State Security, was perhaps the most feared, a vast octopus with tentacles reaching both into the internal lives of Soviet citizens and far beyond into foreign lands. Alongside it, the GRU, the main intelligence directorate, served as the military's intelligence arm, equally adept at the dark arts of information gathering. You might be wondering, what kind of tools did these shadowy figures employ? Well, the ingenuity was, at times, astonishing. Think of the Soviet-engineered Great Seal Bug, a miniature, passive listening device hidden within a wooden replica of the Great Seal of the United States. This seal, gifted to the U.S. ambassador, hung in the Moscow embassy for years, silently radiating conversations when activated by external radio waves. It was a marvel of covert engineering, almost undetectable, with no batteries, no wires, just pure resonance. On the other side, some endeavors were perhaps less successful and more peculiar. Consider the CIA's Project Acoustic Kitty from the 1960s. The idea was to transform a common feline into a mobile eavesdropping device, surgically implanting microphones and transmitters. While the concept had a certain absurd charm, a cat blending effortlessly into the diplomatic landscape, the practicalities proved insurmountable. As charming as our feline friends are, controlling their movements on a mission was not easily achieved. The project, after years and millions spent, was ultimately deemed impractical. These seemingly bizarre tales, like the Great Seal and the Acoustic Kitty, illustrate the lengths to which both sides would go. They reveal the sheer imagination and paranoia that fueled this intelligence war, where every object, every animal even, could conceivably become an instrument in the silent struggle. The stakes, you see, were always too high to ignore any possibility, no matter how outlandish it might seem to us now, gazing back through the dusty archives of history. Tearing down walls. Indeed, as we traverse the twilight years of the Cold War, it becomes ever clearer that beneath the pronouncements and the grand strategies, there was another, more shadowy war being waged, a silent conflict fought with whispers, secrets, and ingenious contraptions. We are speaking, of course, of the world of espionage and counter-espionage, a fascinating dance between nations. Now, you might recall our discussions of the ideological chasm between the democratic West and the communist East. This deep distrust, this fundamental opposition, provided the fertile ground for intelligence agencies to flourish. On the American side, we had the Central Intelligence Agency, or CIA, tasked with gathering intelligence and conducting covert operations abroad. Domestically, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, worked to protect the U.S. from Soviet infiltration within its borders. And then the National Security Agency, the NSA, dedicated itself to the silent war of signals, creating and breaking codes, a truly intricate art. Across the Iron Curtain, the Soviet Union wielded its own formidable instruments of state security. The KGB, the Committee for State Security, was perhaps the most feared, responsible for espionage activities both within the Soviet Union and across the globe. Then there was the GRU, the main intelligence directorate of the General Staff, the military's intelligence arm. These were the titans, the unseen hands guiding much of the Cold War's hidden drama. What's particularly intriguing is the sheer ingenuity, and at times the sheer absurdity, of the methods employed. Consider, if you will, the story of the Great Seal Bug, also known as the Thing. In 1945, a gift, seemingly innocent, was presented to the American ambassador in Moscow, a beautifully carved wooden replica of the Great Seal of the United States. For 6 long years, this seal hung in the ambassador's residence, all the while harboring a tiny passive listening device within it. It had no batteries, no active circuits, it simply resonated when a specific radio signal was aimed at it from outside, effectively transmitting conversations from the room. It was nearly undetectable at the time, a testament to clever engineering. It was only discovered by chance in 1952, after stray voices were picked up on secret frequencies, leading to painstaking searches and the eventual uncovering of this most patient of spies. Then there was the American Project Acoustic Kitty, a venture that some might call ambitious, others perhaps somewhat outlandish. In the 1960s, the CIA embarked upon an attempt to transform a feline into a mobile listening device. The idea was that cats could roam freely, unnoticed, into places where human agents could not. Imagine, if you will, a tiny microphone implanted in a cat's ear canal, a small transmitter at the base of its skull, an antenna running along its tail. After years of effort and no small expense, the project was ultimately abandoned. Cats, it turns out, are not always the most compliant agents, prone to chasing butterflies rather than secrets. It said the first operational test ended rather abruptly with a taxi, though some sources claim this tale is apocryphal. These fascinating anecdotes, from the supremely clever to the surprisingly whimsical, illustrate the lengths to which both superpowers would go. The Cold War, you see, was not simply about missile counts or political speeches. It was also a clandestine chess match, played out in the shadows, with profound consequences for the world. Velvet revolutions unfold. Our journey through the Cold War tapestry brings us now to a shadowy realm, a secret world where information was currency and trust. A luxury few could afford. We speak, of course, of espionage. Indeed, while grand pronouncements and ICBMs often dominated the headlines, much of the true struggle unfolded in whispers and coded messages, in the tireless work of spies and counterintelligence agents. Think of it as a silent war waged beneath the surface of the visible conflict. An intricate dance of deception and discovery. You might be wondering what truly drove these individuals to risk everything. Some certainly were fueled by unwavering ideological conviction, a profound belief in either the capitalist West or the communist East. Others perhaps were motivated by baser instincts, money, grievances, or even just a craving for excitement. Yet in the end, they all became pieces in a much larger, more dangerous game. From the American side, organizations like the CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency, were formed to gather intelligence and conduct covert operations abroad. While the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, focused its energies on protecting the homeland from Soviet infiltration. The NSA, created in 1952, became the silent guardian of communication, both creating and breaking the most complex ciphers. Across the Iron Curtain, the KGB, the Committee for State Security, was the omnipresent eye of the Soviet Union, responsible for intelligence gathering both domestically and internationally. A truly formidable presence indeed. What this meant was a constant cat-and-mouse game, a ceaseless effort by each side to understand the intentions, capabilities, and vulnerabilities of the other. The development of advanced surveillance technologies became paramount. Imagine ground-based listening stations nestled close to borders, like sensitive ears constantly straining to catch distant conversations. And then there were the more audacious projects, such as the Berlin Tunnel, a daring joint American and British venture to burrow beneath East Berlin and tap into Soviet communication lines. Though compromised by a double agent, George Blake, the operation yielded information for a time. Before its dramatic and perhaps deliberately orchestrated discovery, then there were the U-2 spy planes, sleek, high-flying aircraft developed by the Americans, designed to soar far above Soviet airspace, invisible to radar, capturing detailed photographs of military installations and strategic sites. The downing of Francis Gary Power's U-2 in 1960 caused a significant diplomatic crisis. But the photographs captured by these planes proved invaluable, particularly during pivotal moments like the Cuban Missile Crisis. But even with all this advanced technology, the human element remained crucial. After all, machines could collect data, but only human minds could provide context, assessment, and advice on foreign policy. And sometimes, the human element could also bring profound betrayal. The VENONA project, for instance, a secret American effort to decrypt Soviet intelligence communications, revealed the shocking extent of Soviet espionage within the United States and its allies. It brought to light the atomic spies, like Klaus Fuchs, who passed crucial nuclear secrets to the Soviets, accelerating their atomic program by years. Or the infamous Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, a couple caught in the Cold War's unforgiving grasp. It was a time when the very air seemed to hum with secrets, and the greatest battles were often fought not with guns and tanks, but with information, deception, and the unwavering, often unsettling loyalty of individuals to their chosen causes. It was a perilous game, upon which the fate of nations, and perhaps even the world, sometimes rested. The wall comes down. The curtain may have begun to fall on the grand stage of the Cold War and other arenas, but in the shadowy corners of the world, the quiet game of espionage continued with a ferocity all its own. For decades, the United States and the Soviet Union engaged in a relentless struggle for information, a battle waged not with tanks and planes, but with whispers, codes, and the silent movements of agents. Espionage, you see, was considered a matter of critical national importance. And while it often bent the rules of international law, both sides justified it through the lens of national security. Imagine, if you will, the early days of this clandestine contest. After the Second World War, two superpowers emerged, each with diametrically opposed ideologies: the democratic capitalist West led by America, and the communist East with the Soviet Union at its core. This profound ideological chasm created an environment of deep mistrust and fear, compelling each side to seek every advantage, every secret, to understand the other's intentions. And so, the world's most formidable intelligence agencies rose to prominence. On the American side, there was the Central Intelligence Agency, or CIA, tasked with gathering intelligence and conducting covert operations abroad. Domestically, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, focused on protecting America from Soviet meddling within its own borders, even going so far as to monitor the Communist Party USA. Then in 1952, the National Security Agency, the NSA, was born. Its purpose: to protect American communications by both creating and, crucially, breaking codes. Over in the Soviet Union, the landscape was dominated by the omnipresent KGB, the Committee for State Security, a truly formidable agency that conducted espionage both at home and abroad. They even had a military counterpart, the GRU, the Main Intelligence Directorate. Now, among the most astonishing revelations of this era was Project VENONA, a secret American program from 1943 that aimed to decipher the encrypted communications of the KGB and GRU. It was unveiled to the public in 1995, and its decoded messages, along with testimony from defectors, exposed a vast network of Soviet spies operating in the USA, the UK, and Canada. Consider the atomic spies, for instance, individuals like Klaus Fuchs, the British scientist working on the Manhattan Project, who provided the Soviets with detailed blueprints of the atomic bomb, accelerating their nuclear program by years. Then there were Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, an American couple accused of passing atomic secrets, a case that ended with their controversial execution. But the reach of Soviet intelligence extended even to the venerable institutions of British society. The Cambridge Spies figures like Donald Maclean, Kim Philby, and Anthony Blunt were a ring of British agents working for the KGB for decades, deeply embedded within British intelligence and diplomacy. They funneled vital information back to Moscow, revealing Western foreign policy, military plans, and even the development of nuclear weapons. Philby, often referred to as the master spy, served the KGB for nearly 50 years, illustrating the devastating long-term impact such moles could have. These revelations indeed cast a long shadow, leading to a profound erosion of trust between the United States and British intelligence agencies. End of an era. The Berlin Wall, that stark symbol of division, had crumbled, but the shadows it cast would take time to fully recede. Even as bricks and barbed wire were dismantled, another, far more subtle war had been waged for decades, a war of whispers and secrets, of coded messages and clandestine meetings. We speak, of course, of the grand tapestry of espionage that defined so much of the Cold War. You see, when open conflict was too dangerous, when armies stood poised but dared not strike, the battle shifted to the shadows. It became a contest of minds, of information, and of the hidden hand. Imagine, if you will, the sheer weight of knowing that your adversaries were constantly listening, constantly probing, trying to unlock your deepest secrets. Both the East and the West invested immense resources into this clandestine struggle. On the American side, organizations like the CIA, the FBI, and the NSA worked tirelessly to gather intelligence abroad, protect secrets at home, and decipher the intentions of the Soviet bloc. Over in the Soviet Union, the KGB and the GRU mirrored these efforts, creating networks of agents, analysts, and double-crosses that reached into every corner of the globe. Now, the stories from this hidden war are truly remarkable, often bordering on the surreal. Consider the rather ingenious, yet altogether absurd, Soviet listening device known as the Thing, or more formally, the Great Seal Bug. In 1945, a gift was presented to the American ambassador to Moscow, a beautifully carved Great Seal of the United States. For 6 years it hung innocently in his residence, yet hidden within it was a passive bug, a marvel of engineering for its time, designed by Leon Theremin himself. It had no power source, no active circuits. It simply resonated when a specific radio signal hit it from outside, capturing conversations and sending them back to a Soviet listening post, nearly impossible to detect by the technology of the day. It was only discovered by chance in 1952, when American technicians picked up faint, unexplained voices on their frequencies. The full story wasn't even revealed until 1960 at a United Nations Security Council meeting. A rather public unveiling of a very private secret. And what of the West's more unconventional approaches, you might be wondering? Did the other side have equally strange ideas? Indeed. The CIA in the 1960s launched a classified venture known as Project Acoustic Kitty. The idea was to transform a cat into a mobile listening device. Imagine that: tiny microphones implanted, a transmitter at the base of the skull, an antenna along the tail. The thought was that a cat could roam freely around embassies unnoticed. It was quite an investment, some $20 million over years of trials, though the project was ultimately cancelled, perhaps due to the inherent unpredictability of our feline friends. One can only imagine the conversations that led to such a proposal. These seemingly bizarre tales, while almost humorous in hindsight, underscore the sheer desperation and boundless creativity that fueled the espionage arms race. The stakes were simply too high to leave any stone unturned, any avenue unexplored. From the meticulous decryption of Soviet communications in Project VENONA, which painstakingly unmasked numerous Soviet spies embedded within Western governments, to the daring construction of the Berlin Tunnel by the CIA and Mi-6 to tap Soviet communication lines, every possible method was employed. Even high-altitude reconnaissance aircraft, like the American U-2 spy plane, crisscrossed the skies, capturing vital photographic intelligence from afar. This pursuit of information was relentless. A silent battle waged high above and deep below the Earth's surface. New world dawning. The Cold War, an era defined by shadow rather than direct fire, often unfolded in the hidden corners of the world, and even in the most unsuspecting of places. It was a time when the very act of seeking information became an art form, a dangerous ballet performed by intelligence agencies on both sides. Think of it as a chess match, but one where the pieces could move without being seen, and where the most valuable moves were those made in secret. From Washington to Moscow, the United States and the Soviet Union each nurtured vast networks of intelligence and counterintelligence. Agencies such as the CIA and FBI on one side and the formidable KGB and GRU on the other were not merely bureaucratic entities. they were critical instruments of national policy, tasked with discerning the intentions, capabilities, and vulnerabilities of their adversaries. This relentless pursuit of knowledge was paramount, for in a war without direct confrontation, information was the most potent weapon. Indeed, the stories that emerged from this period often feel like tales spun from fiction, yet they are very much drawn from the historical record. Consider the sheer ingenuity and sometimes the sheer absurdity employed. For instance, in 1945, a gift, seemingly innocuous, was presented to the U.S. ambassador in Moscow, a beautiful wooden carving of the Great Seal of the United States. For 6 long years, it hung unsuspectingly in the ambassador's residence. What no one realized then was that within its intricately carved depths lay a passive listening device known as the Thing. This marvel of early Cold War technology required no batteries. It only activated when bathed in a radio signal from outside, resonating with the conversations within the room and broadcasting them to Soviet listeners. It was a silent witness, a wooden ear to countless private discussions. It remained undetected for so long precisely because it had no power source of its own, making it almost invisible to the rudimentary detection methods of the time. It wasn't until 1952, when stray voices were accidentally picked up on secret frequencies, that American technicians, through meticulous searching, finally uncovered this hidden marvel. Imagine the quiet shock, the slow dawning realization that for years the most private discussions had been, in fact, quite public to one's adversary. This wasn't just a technological coup, it was a profound psychological infiltration. And then there's the peculiar, almost whimsical tale of Project Acoustic Kitty, a venture by the CIA in the 1960s. The idea was elegantly simple, yet astoundingly ambitious: train a cat, ostensibly a creature of independent will, to be a mobile listening device. A tiny microphone was implanted in its ear canal, a small transmitter near its skull, and an antenna woven along its tail beneath its fur. The thought was that a cat could roam freely, unnoticed, around foreign embassies or sensitive areas, carrying its secret burden. Millions of dollars were reportedly spent on this endeavor. However, the project ultimately failed. You see, while cats are creatures of habit to some degree, their motivations are their own. They don't always follow instructions, particularly when there's an intriguing bird or a comfortable sunbeam calling to them. Legend has it that the first field test ended abruptly when the feline operative was struck by a taxi near its target, though some within the CIA dispute this dramatic ending. Regardless, the project was deemed impractical. It underscores perhaps that even with boundless resources and ingenuity, the human element, or in this case, the feline element, can present unforeseen complications. The stories of these covert operations, both successful and comically unsuccessful, paint a vivid picture of a world where unseen battles were fought with technology, cunning, and sometimes a touch of the absurd. Lessons learned softly. The shadows cast by the Cold War often stretched into the most unexpected corners, touching upon professions and activities that on the surface seemed far removed from statecraft and diplomacy. We speak, of course, of espionage, a grim dance between nations where secrets were currency and trust a dangerous illusion. It's a practice as old as civilization itself, yet it found new and chilling expressions in the unique circumstances of the post-war world. Here the stakes were unimaginably high, not merely territorial gains, but the very survival of ideologies. And indeed, perhaps even humanity itself. You see, with open conflict too perilous to contemplate, the battle for information became paramount. It was a war fought in whispers and shadows, beneath the veneer of normalcy. Both the United States and the Soviet Union constructed vast, secretive architectures for this purpose. On the American side, agencies like the CIA, or Central Intelligence Agency, formed in 1947, focused on gathering intelligence and conducting covert operations abroad. Domestically, the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, guarded against espionage within the nation's borders, often with an ever-watchful eye on those suspected of communist sympathies. And then there was the NSA, the National Security Agency, established in 1952, dedicated to the intricate art of protecting American communications by both creating and, crucially, breaking ciphers. Across the Iron Curtain, the Soviet Union relied primarily on its formidable KGB, the Committee for State Security, a name that even today evokes a certain chilling dread. This was an omnipresent force, involved in everything from foreign intelligence gathering to the ruthless suppression of dissent within its own borders. Accompanying the KGB was the GRU, the main intelligence directorate of the General Staff, handling military intelligence. Think of them as the silent, unseen arms of their respective empires, constantly probing, listening, and seeking advantage. Project VENONA, unveiled in 1995, stands as a testament to the sheer scale of this clandestine struggle. This was an American program, initiated in 1943, aimed at deciphering the encrypted communications of the KGB and GRU. The revelations were staggering. Uncovering a web of Soviet spies deeply embedded within the United States, Great Britain, and Canada. What's particularly striking are the stories of the atomic spies, individuals like Klaus Fuchs, the British scientist working on the Manhattan Project, who shared invaluable secrets about the atomic bomb, accelerating the Soviet nuclear program by years. His exposure was a direct result of these VENONA decryptions. Then there were Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, American communists, accused and eventually executed for passing atomic secrets to the Soviets. Their trial and fate remain a contentious chapter in American history, and we must not forget the Cambridge Spies, a network of British agents, including figures like Kim Philby, who deeply infiltrated the highest echelons of British intelligence and diplomacy for decades. They fed Moscow critical information on Western foreign policy, military plans, even nuclear weapons development. Philby, often called the Master Spy, served the KGB for nearly 50 years, causing immense damage and fostering a profound distrust between American and British intelligence services. This was a game played with profound consequences indeed, yet beyond the grand plots and ideologues there were also the individuals, the motives for their treacherous dances. For some it was genuine patriotism or fervent political conviction, for others it was ego or simply money. Sometimes it was a sense of frustration, a feeling of being overlooked. Often the motivations were a complex tapestry woven from all these threads. Many were walk-ins. Volunteers who approached hostile intelligence agencies on their own, offering their services. Oleg Penkovsky, for instance, a GRU colonel, voluntarily passed an astonishing volume of classified documents to the US and Great Britain. His intelligence, you see, helped Western leaders gauge the true nature of Soviet aggressive rhetoric, separating bluster from genuine threat. He was a deeply invaluable asset. What becomes clear is that the Cold War was not merely a contest of military might or political systems. It was also a profound psychological struggle. A constant, intricate ballet of deception and revelation, played out by agents and double agents, some driven by conviction, others by greed, and all operating under the immense, crushing weight of secrecy. Echoes of yesterday. Our journey through the quiet shadows of the Cold War would be incomplete, indeed, without pausing to consider the silent war, the war of whispers and secrets, of ciphers and veiled intentions. This was the realm of espionage, where the battles were fought not with tanks and missiles, but with hidden microphones and human frailties. Imagine, if you will, the stakes, two colossal powers locked in a dance of existential dread, each desperately trying to peer behind the other's curtain. This quest for knowledge led to extraordinary measures, some ingenious, some almost absurd. A testament to the lengths to which nations will go to understand and perhaps to control. What makes this particular aspect of the Cold War so compelling is its timelessness, for while the technology changes, the human element, the art of tradecraft, remains a constant echo through history. Consider the cunning of the Great Seal bug, unveiled before an astonished world by Ambassador Henry Cabot Lodge Jr. in 1960. For 6 years, this miniature, passive listening device, gifted to the American ambassador by Soviet schoolchildren, hung disguised within a replica of the Great Seal of the United States. Suspended on his wall in Moscow, it had no power source of its own, you see. It lay dormant, patiently awaiting an external radio signal to awaken it, to resonate with the conversations in the room, and to broadcast those private words back to its Soviet engineers. It was, in its very simplicity, almost undetectable with the technology of the time. A whisper in plain sight, patiently waiting to be heard. Then there was Project Acoustic Kitty, a rather charming, if perhaps misguided, American endeavor of the 1960s. The idea was simple, though its execution was anything but transform a cat into a mobile listening device. Tiny microphones were implanted, transmitters hidden under fur. The very notion speaks to the boundless imagination, and perhaps desperation, that characterized the intelligence arms race. While this particular feline agent never quite lived up to its designer's hopes, as a taxi crossing its path in Washington, D.C. reportedly brought its mission to a rather abrupt end, it highlights the creative, almost theatrical, nature of this hidden conflict. The quest for unseen eyes and unheard ears. Indeed, history often reveals its most peculiar chapters in these quiet corners. These tales, whether of a bug within a seal or a cat in a wire, illustrate the ceaseless, often unseen duel of wits between Washington and Moscow. It was a game of shadows played on a global stage, where every scrap of information held the potential to shift the balance of power, or to avert unimaginable catastrophe. The lessons here, though whispered, are profoundly clear. Future's gentle touch. Our journey through the Cold War has revealed so many secrets, so many layers of strategy and counter-strategy. Today we turn our gaze to the shadow world of espionage itself, a realm where silence often spoke louder than words, and truth was a currency traded in whispers and coded messages. Indeed, the vast, shadowy ballet of spies and counterspies was perhaps the very essence of the Cold War. With open warfare too perilous to contemplate, given the specter of nuclear annihilation, both East and West turned to the surreptitious art of extracting information. And of planting it. Espionage, you see, was the quiet war, fought not with tanks and planes, but with wits, cunning, and sometimes with truly astonishing ingenuity. Take, for instance, a curious tale from Moscow, shortly after the Second World War. In 1945, a gift was presented to the American ambassador W. Averell Harriman, a beautiful wooden carving of the Great Seal of the United States. For 6 years, this symbol of American democracy hung proudly in his Moscow residence. But within its elaborate design lay a secret, a tiny, passive listening device, ingeniously crafted by Leon Theremin, the very inventor of the electronic musical instrument that bears his name. This device, later dubbed the Thing, had no power source of its own. It only became active when hit by a radio signal from outside, resonating the conversations within the room and broadcasting them back to Soviet ears. It was, for years, almost undetectable. The Americans eventually found it, by chance, after intercepting stray voices on secure frequencies. When Ambassador Henry Cabot Lodge Jr. unveiled this deception to the UN Security Council in 1960, it was a moment of profound embarrassment for the Soviets. Imagine a silent ear right in the heart of the embassy for 6 long years. Then there's the more peculiar side of this shadowy conflict. Consider Project Acoustic Kitty, a daring if perhaps absurd venture by the CIA in the 1960s. The idea was simple yet audacious, to turn a feline friend into a mobile listening device. A tiny microphone was implanted in the cat's ear canal, a small transmitter at the base of its skull, and an antenna threaded along its tail. The thought was that cats could roam freely, inconspicuously, around sensitive areas like foreign embassies. While the project was eventually abandoned, with the CIA concluding that using cats for such missions was not practical, it does offer a glimpse into the boundless creativity and perhaps desperation that defined Cold War espionage. The exact fate of the first Acoustic Kitty is shrouded in legend, with some tales suggesting a fateful encounter with a taxi. Regardless of the details, it speaks to a very human tendency to push the boundaries of what is possible, even when facing the utterly improbable. These fascinating anecdotes, from a silent wooden seal to a feline spy, highlight the extraordinary measures both superpowers would take. Whether successful or not, they painted a vivid picture of a world where information was power, and obtaining it by any means necessary was the ultimate prize. The clandestine struggle wasn't always about grand operations. Sometimes it was about the smallest, most unexpected details. Memory of two powers. Our journey through the twilight years of the Cold War brings us to a fascinating and often shadowy realm, the world of espionage. It is a world where secrets are currency, and the lines between friend and foe, truth and deception, often blur into a muted gray. Imagine, if you will, the quiet hum of a listening post in the dead of night, or the subtle rustle of a briefcase exchanging hands in a dimly lit alley in Berlin. This was the silent ballet of spies playing out on a global stage. You see, while armies stood ready and missiles were poised, the true war was often fought in whispers and shadows, in the careful collection and daring theft of information. Both sides, the capitalist West and the communist East, sought every possible advantage, every small detail that might tip the balance of power. What's truly intriguing is the sheer ingenuity, and at times the outright absurdity, of some of these covert operations. Consider the VENONA project, a remarkable American endeavor from 1943 that sought to break Soviet diplomatic and intelligence codes. For decades, the very existence of this project remained one of the Cold War's most closely guarded secrets. Only in 1995 were its findings fully declassified, revealing a tapestry of Soviet espionage within the United States, Britain, and Canada. These decoded messages, alongside the testimonies of defectors like Igor Guzenko and Elizabeth Terrell Bentley, painted a stark picture of a vast network of agents. Among the most infamous were the atomic spies. Imagine the tension surrounding individuals like Klaus Fuchs, the British scientist working on the Manhattan Project, who, driven by ideology, delivered atomic secrets to the Soviets. His treachery, uncovered through those very VENONA decryptions, is believed to have shaved years off the Soviet nuclear weapons program. Then there were Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, American communists accused of passing atomic secrets themselves, whose controversial trial and execution in 1953 still echo in historical debates. And of course the Cambridge Five, a network of privileged British intellectuals like Kim Philby and Anthony Blunt, who, for decades, infiltrated the highest echelons of British intelligence and diplomacy, serving as deep-cover moles for the KGB. Philby, often called the Master Spy, operated for nearly 50 years. Their betrayals eroded trust between allies, leaving indelible scars on the intelligence communities of both sides. But it wasn't just about human agents. Technology, too, played a pivotal role. And Azayam and Yerokal listening posts were strategically placed near Soviet borders, in places like Scotland, Turkey, and Berlin, all dedicated to intercepting and monitoring Soviet communications. And then there was the audacious Berlin Tunnel. In 1954, British and American agents embarked on a daring mission, digging a clandestine tunnel beneath East Berlin to tap into Soviet communication lines. What they didn't know, at least for a time, was that the operation had been compromised from the start by a British mole named George Blake. Yet Moscow permitted the operation to continue for 2 years, feeding the West carefully curated disinformation, all while gathering intelligence on Western capabilities. It was a clever, if unsettling, game. What makes these stories so compelling is not just the cloak and dagger excitement, but the profound human drama at its core. The motivations of these spies were as varied as they were complex: patriotism, political conviction, monetary gain, or even sheer ego. Some were walk-ins, individuals who volunteered their services, often driven by a deeply held belief or personal grievance. Oleg Penkovsky, a high-ranking GRU officer, for instance, became a critically valuable double agent, providing an abundance of information to the Americans and British. His insights were said to have helped Western leaders understand Khrushchev's aggressive rhetoric, particularly during the Cuban Missile Crisis, suggesting it was often bluff rather than genuine intent. Indeed, this clandestine world, with its shadows and its secrets, was a mirror to the larger anxieties of the age. It reflected the desperate lengths to which nations would go, not merely to gain advantage, but to quell the profound fear of the unknown. One might wonder, what kinds of tools would such a shadowy world produce? One planet's slumber. Our journey through the labyrinthine corridors of the Cold War would be incomplete, wouldn't it? Without pausing to reflect on the very human element that often decided the fate of nations, the spy. Imagine, if you will, the twilight world where loyalties were fluid and secrets were the most valuable currency. This was the realm of espionage, a clandestine dance between two colossal powers, each striving to peer into the very heart of the other. It wasn't always grand pronouncements or rattling sabers. Often it was the quiet whisper, the hidden microdot, or the surreptitious meeting in a darkened alley that shaped the course of history. The Cold War, you see, was truly a spy's paradise. With open warfare deemed too catastrophic, the battle shifted to the shadows. Agencies like the CIA and the FBI on one side and the formidable KGB and GRU on the other meticulously built vast networks. Their task: to gather intelligence, to decipher intentions, and to, at times, sow discord, all without ever firing a shot in anger. It's a testament to human ingenuity and perhaps to human paranoia that such elaborate systems could be constructed. Consider the motivations of these silent warriors. For some, it was ideology, a profound belief in their chosen system, be it the tenets of communism or the ideals of democracy. For others, perchance it was money or even simple ambition, a desire for recognition in a world that seldom acknowledged their sacrifices. And for a few, it was a complex cocktail of all these things, a web of loyalties and betrayals that could twist the most steadfast heart. We've touched upon the VENONA project before, a truly remarkable undertaking by American cryptographers who, from as early as 1943, began the painstaking process of deciphering Soviet communications. It was a slow, deliberate effort, an intellectual battle won byte by byte, word by word, but the revelations were seismic. They exposed a chilling reality: Soviet agents had deeply infiltrated Western institutions. Names like Klaus Fuchs, a brilliant physicist working on the Manhattan Project, emerged, revealing how profoundly the secrets of the atomic bomb had been compromised. And then, the tragic tale of Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, a stark reminder of the ultimate price some paid for their convictions, or perhaps their complicity. Sweet dreams, my friend. So here we are at the quiet close of our long journey together through the annals of the Cold War. We've traced its vast expanse from the ashes of one great war to the uneasy calm that followed many decades later, a time when two colossal powers, with their fervent beliefs, shaped and reshaped the very fabric of our shared world. From the meticulous Spycraft, the listening devices hidden in plain sight, the daring tunnels beneath divided cities, and even the rather eccentric idea of acoustic kitties, to the grand strategic maneuvers of nuclear deterrence, we've seen how a conflict fought largely in the shadows still cast a profound light upon human ingenuity, paranoia, and perseverance. It was an era defined by an ideological chasm, a stark divide that influenced everything from technological innovation to the simplest aspects of daily life behind the Iron Curtain and within the vibrant, often anxious societies of the West. We explored the figures who stood at the precipice, those who made decisions that rippled across oceans and generations. We've seen how the actions of a few, whether in the grand halls of power or in the hushed corners of espionage, could alter the course of history, much like a single stone dropped into a still pond can send ripples to distant shores. What truly fascinates about this epic is its lingering legacy. The Cold War may have formally ended with the fall of walls and the dissolution of empires. But its echoes, its lessons, and perhaps even some of its old anxieties still resonate in the geopolitical landscape we inhabit today. It taught us about the inherent fragility of peace, the persistent allure of power, and the complex, often contradictory, motivations that drive nations and individuals alike. It was a testament to the human capacity for extraordinary creation and, at times, profound destruction. And as our exploration of this captivating period draws to a close, I hope you've found a sense of perspective, a quiet understanding of how we arrived at this moment in time. Perhaps, too, you've found a measure of calm, realizing that many of the grand narratives of human endeavor, with all their turbulence, eventually settle into the quiet archives of history. Thank you for joining me on this particular narrative, allowing these stories to gently accompany you as you drift into slumber. If you enjoyed our time together, a simple thumbs up and subscribing to the channel would truly mean a great deal. And if you feel so inclined, there are many other stories within these digital shelves, waiting for you to explore. Sweet dreams, and until next time.